Chosen one. If you are hearing this right now, do not brush it off as coincidence. You did not find these words by accident. Heaven arranged this moment because something is already moving in your life, and most people miss the sign when it comes. They are too distracted, too discouraged, too convinced that God has gone quiet. But you are still here. That means something. The waiting season is ending. Not because you finally figured something out, not because the circumstances suddenly changed, but because God has set a time, and that time is now. A divine transition is beginning, the closing of one chapter, the opening of another. And what is waiting on the other side is not what you imagined during the dark years. It is better. But before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Think about the last time you prayed for something and heard nothing back. Think about the dream you stopped mentioning because people kept telling you it was too big. Think about the version of yourself you buried just to survive. Hold that in your mind, because this message is for that version of you, the one that never gave up, even when giving up would have been the easier choice. Let me tell you what the path of the chosen actually looks like. It does not look like a red carpet. It does not look like applause and open doors and smooth sailing, most of the time. It looks like waiting rooms, closed doors, and people who do not understand why you keep going. It looks like praying in silence, like believing without evidence, like walking forward when everything in your body says stop. You know that feeling, you have lived it. And here is what most people never realize about that kind of life. Every single moment of that endurance was being recorded, not wasted. Recorded scripture says, "Blessed is the one who remains steadfast under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life." You did not stand the test perfectly. Nobody does. But you stood it sincerely. You stood it without turning back, and heaven saw every step. Now, let me show you something in Scripture that changes how you see your own story. There was a man named Joseph. He had a dream from God, a vision that one day he would rise, that his life would carry weight, purpose, meaning. And what followed that dream was not celebration. It was a pit. His own brothers threw him in, then slavery, then false accusation from a woman who lied about him, then prison. Years passed. The people he helped forgot his name. The promise God gave him must have seemed like a cruel joke in that cell. But here is the thing Joseph understood that kept him from breaking. The pit was not punishment. The prison was not abandonment. It was preparation. Because when Pharaoh finally called for him, Joseph did not need more time. He was already ready. The darkness had done its work, and in one single day, God moved him from the prison floor to second in command of Egypt. One day, years of preparation, one day of release. Chosen one, your story mirrors this more than you know. The doors that stayed closed were not evidence against you. They were divine protection. God was keeping you hidden until the appointed time, and that time is now. But I want to be honest about what the chosen path costs. While everyone else was chasing comfort, you were being trained in silence, while others were celebrated for ordinary things. You were being shaped for something heavier, and that shaping came through things that hurt, through rejection that taught you not to need people's approval, through loneliness that drove you toward God instead of toward distraction, through delays that built patience you did not know you needed. You were never broken. You were being refined. Think about a diamond before it becomes that precious stone. It is just carbon buried under immense pressure, under extreme heat. And if that carbon could speak, it would cry out. It would say, "The pressure is too much. I cannot take this anymore." But what the carbon does not understand is that the pressure is not punishment. It is the very thing creating something rare, something that reflects light. Chosen one, that is what God has been doing in you. And the world is about to see what the pressure produced. Here is something that rarely gets talked about. The chosen ones feel different their entire lives. Even as children, even before they had words for faith. There was always something. A feeling of not quite fitting, a sense that the surface-level life was not for them. A quiet voice inside that said there is more. And for years, that feeling was confusing, isolating. They tried to be normal. They tried to silence it, but it would not go away, because that voice was not confusion. It was calling. God was marking you from the beginning, setting you apart, preparing you, even when you did not have language for it. That inability to settle was not a flaw. It was a gift. That refusal to accept shallow living is what kept you seeking more. And now you understand why. You were different because you were being prepared for a different path. Now I want to show you 3 signs that your transition is already here. The first sign is holy restlessness. Something has shifted inside you recently. You used to be able to stay where you were, to tolerate the same patterns, the same numbness, the same routine. But something in your spirit will not settle anymore. You cannot pretend. You cannot shrink back to who you used to be. That restlessness is not anxiety. It is God enlarging your capacity. It is the signal that you have outgrown the container you were in. The second sign is that people from your past season are falling away. Not because you pushed them out, but because God is creating space. He is removing people who cannot go where you are going. People who would talk you out of your obedience. People who are still comfortable in the old chapter that God is closing for you. Do not mourn those departures. That is not loss. That is God's protection. The third sign is confirmations everywhere. Numbers you keep seeing. Songs that hit at exactly the right moment. Scriptures that find you when you are not looking for them. Conversations where a stranger says something that only God knew you needed to hear. All of it pointing to the same message. It is time. Move forward. Trust me. Step out. When these 3 signs are present, do not hesitate. That is the voice of God, clearing your path. And tied to these signs is a promise. An unexpected meeting is coming. Not necessarily a dramatic vision in the sky, not a spectacle for the crowd to witness, but a divine intersection. A moment where heaven touches your timeline and confirms what your spirit has quietly known for years. For some of you, that meeting will come through a person. A stranger will say something so specific, so precisely what you needed to hear, that you will know immediately that was not a coincidence. That was arranged. For others, it will come as a supernatural peace that suddenly floods your soul in the middle of what should be chaos. You have carried anxiety for so long that you forgot what peace felt like. And then one day, without explanation, the weight lifts. For others still, the meeting will come as an open door, an opportunity you stopped praying for because you thought your window had passed. But God's timing is not past its window. When He opens that door, no critic and no delay can shut it again. Stay alert. The meeting is already in motion. Now I want to address something that may have lived in the back of your mind for a long time. You have wondered if you missed your moment. You have looked at your age, your circumstances, the years that passed, and you thought maybe it is too late. Maybe God moved on. Maybe the promise expired. Hear this clearly. God's delays are not His denials. His silence is not His absence. And His timing is not late, it is precise. Here is what most people miss about divine timing. God is often waiting for something in you to shift, waiting for you to release control, waiting for you to stop forcing doors open with your own hands, waiting for you to arrive at a place of full surrender. Not because He wants you to suffer, but because He knows that a life surrendered to His plan is the only life that carries real peace. And here is what happens when that surrender finally comes. What took years to set up can unfold in days. What seemed impossible becomes easy. What was locked opens effortlessly. That is what is about to happen for you. Let me tell you about someone who sent a message not long ago. They said they had been walking through the darkest season of their life. Depression, financial collapse, relationships that had fallen apart. They felt forgotten by God and abandoned by people. And then they heard a message like this one, and something cracked open inside them. They said, "I stopped fighting the process. I stopped demanding answers on my timeline. I surrendered fully, not halfway." And within 2 weeks, a job offer came out of nowhere. A reconciliation I had stopped praying for happened on its own, and peace I had not felt in years became my atmosphere. And then they said the thing that stayed with me: I am proof that God keeps His promises to the chosen ones. That testimony is not a miracle. It is a pattern. When His chosen ones align, when they stop resisting the process, when they surrender fully, heaven moves. What was delayed gets released. What was blocked gets opened. What was stolen gets restored. That pattern is not reserved for someone else. It is for you. Now, if this message has been a source of strength to you, if these words have carried you through a hard season, there is a link in the description below. It is there for anyone who feels moved to help this work reach more people who are walking through the same valleys you have walked. Whatever you feel led to give, it matters more than you know. Now let us keep going. I want to talk about surrender, because it is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the life of the chosen. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is trust, active, deliberate, costly trust. It is releasing control of outcomes you were never designed to carry. And it does not happen once. It happens daily. Here is what surrender looks like in real life. When you wake up at 3 a.m. anxious about your future, surrender sounds like this: God, I do not know how this works out, but I trust you more than I trust my fear. I release control, take it. And the act of saying that and meaning it begins to retrain your nervous system toward peace. When someone wrongs you, and every part of you wants to hold on to the offense, surrender sounds like this: God, I give this to you. I will not carry bitterness, not because they deserve grace, but because I deserve freedom. I choose peace. And the moment you release it, truly release it, something lifts. Something that was costing you energy you did not even realize you were spending. Every time you practice surrender, you build spiritual muscle. You train your heart to trust God's wisdom over your limited view. And over time, surrender stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like relief. One of the deepest gifts of this season is learning to forgive. Think about the people who wounded you, the ones who rejected you, the ones who laughed at your faith, dismissed your calling, and walked out when you needed them most. For years, you may have carried the weight of that, replaying conversations, feeling the sting of their words, wondering what it says about you that they left. Here is what God is doing now. He is giving you the grace to release them. Forgiveness is not saying what they did was acceptable. Forgiveness is saying, I will not let what they did define me anymore. I will not carry this poison. I release them to God, and I step into my future free. When you forgive, you do not set them free. You set yourself free, and the space that opens up when resentment leaves, that is where peace moves in. That is where your next chapter starts. There is a shift coming in how you experience your own identity. For years, your sense of who you were was shaped by pain, by labels that other people put on you, by the worst things that happened to you, and the worst versions of you that showed up in your hardest moments. You have been living as someone defined by those things, even after you outgrew them. Even after you were forgiven, even after you moved on. That is about to change. You are entering a season where you begin to see yourself the way God sees you, not through the filter of your failures, not through the lens of what you lost or what was done to you, but through the truth of what He placed inside you before the world got its hands on you. Your gifts, your calling, your divine imprint. And once you know who you are in God, truly know it, the world cannot rename you. It cannot reduce you. It cannot talk you out of what God has written over your life. This is the work of self-discovery that the chosen ones go through. It is not comfortable. It requires you to sit with the parts of yourself you would rather keep buried, the insecurities that drove you to perform for approval, the fears that made you smaller than you were meant to be, the agreements you made with the lies people spoke over you, lies like you are too much, you are not enough, you are too late, you are too broken. You have to confront those agreements. You have to name them, and then you have to renounce them because they were never the truth. They were the enemy's strategy to keep you disqualified in your own mind. Because if he can make you believe you are disqualified, he never has to fight you. You do the work for him. But here is what happens when a chosen one discovers who they truly are. They stop shrinking. They stop apologizing for taking up space. They stop waiting for someone else to validate what God has already confirmed. They step into the room differently. They speak differently. They carry themselves with a quiet confidence that has nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with knowing whose they are. That one shift in identity changes everything. Your relationships, your decisions, your courage, your capacity to endure. Because a person who knows who they are cannot be easily shaken. Prayer becomes your anchor through all of this. Not a religious routine, not a checklist, a relationship, a living conversation where your spirit realigns, where clarity comes, where peace that passes understanding settles over the places that anxiety has lived for years. Scripture says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and minds." That guarding peace is your inheritance. You do not earn it by performing well. You receive it by showing up honestly, vulnerably, faithfully, and letting God meet you there. Prayer is how the chosen ones stay tethered. It is how they hear the voice that tells them which door to walk through. It is how they endure when the path gets steep, and it is how they remain soft when the world is trying to harden them. Stay soft, stay close, stay in the conversation, because God is still speaking, and you are still listening. And connected to prayer is resilience, because the chosen ones are not people who were never knocked down. They are people who have been knocked down more times than they can count, and every single time, they got back up. Not because they are stronger than others, because they are anchored to something that cannot be moved. There is a difference between surviving and thriving. Many people endure, they white-knuckle their way through the hard seasons, barely holding on, counting down the days until the pressure lets up. But the chosen ones are different. They do not just survive the fire. They are changed by it, refined in it. They come out of the hard season not broken but sharpened, more focused, more dangerous to the lies that tried to stop them, more dangerous to the fear that tried to disqualify them, because resilience in the life of a chosen one is not just a personal quality, it is a testimony. Every time you endured and did not quit, you became proof that God's grace is sufficient, that His strength is made perfect in weakness. And when you walk into your calling carrying that kind of track record, hell trembles, because you are no longer someone who can be easily shaken. You are someone who has already been through the fire, and you are still standing. Let me paint a picture for you before we close. Imagine a river. It does not fight the current. It does not resist the banks. It does not force its way through solid ground. It simply flows, and as it flows, it gives life. It nourishes everything it touches. It creates ecosystems. It sustains things that would die without it. That is what your life looks like when you are in harmony with God's will. You stop fighting the process. You stop forcing the timeline. You stop measuring your worth by the speed of your progress. You simply flow in obedience, in faith, in trust. And as you flow, you bring life to everything around you. Your words become healing. Your presence becomes peace. Your story becomes hope for someone still in the valley you just walked out of. That is the life of a chosen one who has surrendered. Not passive, purposeful. Not weak, powerful. not waiting anymore. Moving. Before we close, I want you to do one thing. Pause for a moment, take a breath, and bring to mind the one thing you stopped believing in, the promise that felt too old to still be valid. The dream you stopped mentioning, the version of yourself you tucked away because it seemed naive to keep hoping. Bring that to mind, and hear this. God has not forgotten. The delay is not a denial. What He promised you is still yours. The appointed time is not past, it is near. You are not late. You are not disqualified. You are not forgotten. You are entering a transition, a holy shift. The season of proving is giving way to the season of fulfillment. The weight you have been carrying is about to be replaced with peace, not because you earned it by striving, but because you received it by surrendering. That is the grace of the chosen path. You do not arrive by being perfect. You arrive by being faithful. Stay ready, stay soft, stay faithful, stay aligned, because the God who called you is faithful to complete what He began. As it is written, He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. Chosen one, you are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are loved, and your story is far from over. The best is still ahead. And when you look back years from now on this exact moment, on the season you are coming out of, on the pain that felt like it would never end, on the prayers that seemed to disappear into silence, you will understand it all. You will see the shape of it, the preparation, the protection, the precision, and you will say, every single thing He allowed was working toward this. Not one day was wasted. Not one tear went unnoticed. Every moment of endurance was building something you could not yet see. That day is coming. Hold on until you reach it.